Okay.
Good evening. I'd like to call the Board of Education School District 68 Business Committee meeting to order and recognize that tonight's meeting is being held on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw people. We do have an addition to the agenda. The addition comes from the last closed board meeting. It'll be under new business, it'll be item 11.1, Hammond Bay Phase 1 Capital Project. Do we have any other additions to the agenda, deletions, or changes in order? Any objection to the approval of the agenda? The agenda is approved unanimously. Any changes or suggestions or edits or recommendations or thoughts or ideas about the minutes from the Business Committee held on January 17, 2018? Any objection to the approval of the minutes as they are? Minutes are approved unanimously. We have no presentations this evening, although I have noted that there are approximately 180 pages printed but front and back, so in 3 hours time that's about 30 seconds a page, so let's get started. Item 8.1, Secretary Treasurer McVeigh and Director of Finance Tanya Sutton presenting the 2017 and 18 amended budget. You have 30 minutes.
I was going to say, so right off the get-go, no pressure.
No pressure.
Here we go.
I have to count how many pages you have.
Close it down.
Maybe while Tanya's getting prepared, just on page 8 we have a action sheet that we'll ask you to look at the end of the presentation, recommending that the business committee recommend to the Board of Education that the amended budget be passed through bylaw at our special meeting on February 21st.
Okay, good evening, everyone. So annual amended budget. Tonight I'm going to just highlight the changes that have taken place since last presenting in mid-October. And these are just the last items that are making up our annual amended budget, which will be submitted to the ministry for the end of the month. I'm realizing this is a little small, so you may have to be looking at your paper documents. My apologies, a lot of information on one sheet. So if looking at the revenue sheet, the top section would be the operating revenue. So total revenue in the operating is equal to 127 million. The total revenue for our special purpose, 20 million. I'm rounding. Total revenue for consolidated operating and special purpose, total of 147,451. The adjustments are an actual reduction solely due to the transfer from operating to local capital. So the adjustments for revenue are the 144.383 FTE different between our annual budget and our annual amended budget in our operating Ministry of Education grant, so 924,000. We received an after-school art and sports initiative, adjusted our ISC enrollment, received a Canadian Tire grant for the McGurr Playground, received another small adjustment, Classroom Enhancement Fund, and then some other miscellaneous school grants, and then the transfer out to local capital. So then the opposites.
What's that Canadian Tire grant, 450,000?
Yes.
Yeah. I thought it was 390.
I believe there was a subsequent grant, so this would be the total of the two.
Whoa.
It's a nice playground.
I know. I gotta go buy some tires or something to thank them.
That would be good.
So the expenses, which are displayed by category, including salaries, services and supplies, and benefits, And they as well total 147, 451, 950. And we will discuss notes 1 through 8 next. Just a quick FTE by category summary. And the most recent changes, so a decrease in teacher FTE, an increase in EA, and slight increases in the admin, support, and other professionals. So for teachers, originally, there was a couple of Classroom Enhancement Fund submissions. The last we brought to you totaled 102.9 FTE. We did submit one last request for a small addition, and it was approved, so we received the full 107,239, which was an increase of the 4,339. We reported out, Mr. Blaine reported out a couple of weeks back that there was some second semester FTE in the Classroom Enhancement Fund that the ministry advised us was not actually going to be funded. So we reported at that time that we were going to be pulling that funding out of the budget entirely because it would not be forthcoming from the ministry in our installment payments. However, right at the last minute, we received further information on that, advising us that although it may not be FTE in the sense that it was before, it would be utilized in remedy or however else it's being sorted out right now, and that's sort of yet to be determined. So it is out of teacher FTE. It is sitting in an account so that we can, after we move forward and we know how that's going to look, allocate it out, whether it's back into FTE staffing, remedy staffing, whatever that might look like. Further to that, we also advised that there was a surplus of 10 FTE. When we originally created the annual budget, we were doing so very cautiously, not knowing what the CEF funding was going to look like. And so we were trying to be cognizant of risk if we didn't receive all the funding. We did receive all the funding, so those FTE were surplus, one-time money, which we took out, and as Mr. Blaine laid out the budget initiatives that we were unable to allocate resources to earlier in the year, we had that money to allocate them out now, and there was the list of those strategies which are incorporated into the budget. So the .2 sexual health and .2 social justice coordinators were part and parcel of those initiatives. Prorated FTE for the balance of the school year is in there. And then there is some other FTE added, district ELL, learning alt, and so forth. Overall reduction, no, due to the decrease of the two big items there. Administrators, we added a prorated district principal for evaluations, so that is a .6 FTE. Other professionals, we had the director of student data revert back to principal and replaced that with 2 finance managers. We reduced our other professional wellness fund from .4 to .2. And then there are just a couple of housekeeping items which are basically a couple of positions that were senior long-time employees who have been off and left and been replaced by junior employees at different pay scales. So just some adjusting items there. Our education assistants, quite a few entries in here. There are a couple housekeeping items. One of the things that we're finding is just with a bit more resources in the finance department, we're able to really catch some of the things that, for instance, the DL, learning assistant correction of hours, was a year or so ago, they were given an extra hour a week, and that was never reduced, just an error a year or so ago. So just a correcting item now. The education assistant, since the last time, there's been an infusion due to the needs out at the school. So overall difference of 9.392 FTE. And then the support staff, this is where those district budget strategy initiatives came in again. We added a carpenter in this for the remainder of this year, prorated for the next 2 budget years, it'll be a 1.0. The emergency caretaker FTE added was added due to need. IS project secretary, there was some need there, so it was a short-term add. And then just a couple of miscellaneous adjustments for an add of 0.98 FTE. So, of course, more staffing, additional replacement costs, the benefits as we, okay.
I look back in question number 7, and I look back at the city's for the whole year, and I'm trying to verify the number was actually $2,140,000 some odd that the district paid out. And if you took last year's number and we're growing, and rolled into this year's, half of that for half a year should be upwards of over $1 million. And I know they said that was conservative, but that's very conservative. And there's also the savings from the municipal pension piece that's rolled in there. So I know they said it was conservative, but I did some research back on that. I feel that that's very conservative. So I'm just wondering if there's been any talk about reflecting the real number.
Comment on that or no? It is a conservative number. We do anticipate a greater savings than that, but staff is not recommending that in the budget we be any less conservative than what we're being.
And then the salary, or sorry, the supplies and services, those are almost, sorry.
Chair, we were on note 6 there. Were we?
We were on
We were on 7.
Note 7, so, okay. And Mr. Zver is asserting that that number is conservative, too conservative.
Well, and I think staff is agreeing that it's
It is
conservative.
conservative.
Yeah.
We took a conservative approach, yeah.
Good, thank you.
So note 8, supplies and services, those were, these items are, again, referring back to the action sheet that John Lane brought a couple weeks ago. The rest of the budget initiatives, predominantly these are what are listed here for you to, or what the differences are. The only one that's not, of course, is the CEF surplus that we have, the FTE that we took out, that's allocated over into the account awaiting how that's going to look for whether it's remedy or back into FT or however that's going to go. It's targeted for CEF, so it's just sort of sitting there waiting for further information.
Electronic signs, how many were there for 100,000?
That is, yes, is it 150? Marquee signs, 100,000.
Yeah.
And I believe there are 4 of them, yes. 3, sorry, 3, my apologies, 3. So those are the changes. Now, this is where I'm sorry, apologizing in advance for the page flipping. However, now on to the actual ministry document. And a lot of the schedules within the document are the expenses and the revenue rolling up from just the salaries and the services and supplies into our total revenue and our total expenditures. So to go through them, I don't believe is necessary. We can highlight them for you, but important, I believe, would be your page 26 of 173, which is Schedule 4. And this is the capital revenue and expense. So as this does roll up into the bylaw, a couple of important notes. Revenue in this year due to a couple of land sales is 4.8 million. The revenue that we are going to amortize or recognize, deferred capital revenue, is 5.4 million. In that revenue line as well is our investment income, 45,000. So total revenue there of 10 million. Down a little lower under the expenses, we will have the amortization or depreciation of our tangible capital assets, to the tune of 7.8, and the capital loan interest totaling 7.791, for a net of 2.5 million. So that will be a increase to the local capital fund. And then there is our transfer from operating into local capital. However, the 3.492 will of course be less the tangible capital assets purchased, the capital loan payments. So what's showing as the budgeted surplus of 6 million is how the budget document is presented. The financial statements will show the true picture of where the expenses come into play and what that actual surplus will be going into the next year. But for the budget document for the ministry, they want to see what our budgeted surplus is for the year. So from here, I would offer this reconciliation for you. So a summary of that schedule is there for you.
What page is that?
Sorry? That is back to the slide. Sorry, that's why I put the slide there, just so that I could not have two documents going all at once.
Page
Are you there?
36.
Okay, okay, perfect, okay. And so from there, I think, again, if you were to look at page 23 of 173, this would be the special purpose revenue, which as previously shown on the PowerPoint is the 20 million. And then we are going to roll up a couple of more into Schedule 2B, which is your page 20 of 173. And that would be the total operating expense, previously noted at 127,347. Schedule 2A, which would be your page 19, which would be our total revenue. Schedule 2A, page 18 of 173. Revenue less our expenses equals the surplus that we are transferring over to local capital. Schedule 1, which is page 17 of 173.
Page what, sorry?
17.
Okay, thank you.
So this is the accumulated surplus. Again, it's going to show the full surplus, where the expenses will be taken from that in the financial statements, so that will come into play when the financial statements are presented. For now, the operating opening surplus was 5.3. We have utilized 2.8, leaving a balance of 3.2. In the capital fund, we started with 6 million. The land sales equaled the 2.5, and the transfer to local capital, the 3.4, for the total added surplus in the capital fund of 6 million. And right up into statement 2, and the final slide, which is a reconciliation for you. So starting at the top of statement 2, there's 2 pages to statement 2. There's a very short page with draft across it, and then the main first page of it. Are we all there? I hope, okay. So again, as reported earlier, the FTE increase from the annual budget to the annual amended is a total of 144,383. Our total revenue, 159,194. Again, the reconciliation on the slide provides a bit clearer detail. Total expenditures of 155, and leaving us the net revenue, the budgeted surplus, and the actual bylaw expense amount on the next page. is our total operating expense, our total special purpose expense, our capital expense, and the tangible capital assets that will be purchased from the transfer to local capital. So the budget bylaw will be 156 million. That was pretty quick.
Yeah, any questions? Well, it's less than 30 seconds per page.
I tried.
All right, we're on task. Any questions? We've had an opportunity to sort of see this from the first time it was presented. Yeah, trustee.
Well, I confess I did not read with great thoroughness the part about dealing with surpluses in the ministry documents. But are we to expect that at some point during the next little while we will have to have a good discussion about surpluses and what we might do? We have needs in our district.
Sure.
We've been reading the newspapers and
Sure.
they're telling us our needs.
So I had a couple of questions with respect to that. So we've moved some money from operations into local capital, but correct me if I'm wrong, but like 1.9 million of that was sort of, we weren't sure whether we were going to get to keep that or not. So we've just sort of put it into local capital as a temporary placeholder with the recommendation that we not do anything with it until such time that we learn.
So the reason for the risk factor, and you're absolutely right, and the reason for the risk factor is we are supplemented. Our district is given, this last year, was $3 million for supplemental for our teacher salary. Because our district is predominantly higher salaries than the province. The province is looked at as district by district. There's a provincial average salary cost. And if districts have a younger demographic, their salaries will be lower. If they've got a mature demographic that's highly qualified, their salaries, of course, will be higher. So the ministry provides supplemental funding if you are our district with that higher cost. The concern now is with the CEF, there has been a mass influx of young talent into the sector. And so we're concerned that we may lose some of that funding. We've already lost 247,000 of it. However, that was at September 30th because this funding is based on the data submitted to the ministry on our 1701 data at September 30th every year. So we won't actually have full impact of that until this coming December when we get our recalc. What we received this December was a slight, like I say, $240,000, $247,000 was taken away from us. But at September 30th, we didn't have all the teachers in the house. We didn't have their seniority ported in necessarily. We didn't even have all their TQS cards for sure. We don't know what their education level was at the time, so it was very premature. Concerning for us that we could lose up to 3 million. We don't know. And so we're saying that 1.9 at this particular point in time, we would really like to shelter in case we lose this funding. However, if we don't lose the funding, we can either apply it to some asset management initiatives, or we can put it back over into operating, however that looks.
And the other thing that I noticed was the line items that showed up for this year were the sale of property. So that added greatly to the bottom line for what we're showing for local capital.
Absolutely.
But I didn't see any real big withdrawals there. So what I'm assuming then is that some of the capital projects that we're involved in, we haven't seen the bills. They haven't come in yet for these. So that number is much bigger than what it truly is, because we need to subtract what we've sort of already spent for some of these capital projects.
Exactly. And so our tech plan, our 1.192 million, 331,000 for our loans, and then the current projects that we are working on right now, all of that will be reconciled and that will show up on the financial statements. So the ministry document wants to see what we're saying is our surplus. The financial statements is where it will all wash. And at June 30th, we'll have the figure that was basically within these statements that we worked from, saying what was our last year and where are we at now. So that will come into play in the financial statements.
Okay, great, thanks. Rob?
On that, just following through, I mean, whole version is for $6.5 million from the district that they have earmarked either at the conservative or report over estimated for teacher salaries and stuff, it could be clawed back. But the true number is 6.5 million. Whether you put it in local capital or anything else, if the government doesn't put their hand out to ask for a return on it, that money is going to be spent in the district, which is probably a good thing. But to say otherwise, that we're being conservative and we still have needs in this district, this is what I'm here about talking about. We're being very conservative, but yet we have schools that need some work and we have some schools that need some stuff done to them. And that's why I asked the question. You can be conservative, but at what point do you start putting back in and actually spend the funds before they're recalled back? Because once they're gone out of your hands, because you have them, they're not going to get them back too easy.
Yeah, sure. I'm just wondering if staff has a recommendation on that, based on past experience in the, like, if before they decide they're gonna claw it back, and what if we've spent it and we say, well, we don't have anything to give you back, we've spent it.
Yeah, I think that staff has to be conservative in their approach. I mean, as you can see, there were a number of budget initiatives that we prioritized that we did spend and embed in this budget, and there have been increases either put aside for those initiatives. So we are spending a portion of the additional revenue that we've received in this budget, either on FTE or on projects. So I don't think we can say that we haven't taken, for lack of a better word, a happy medium in terms of being conservative and putting money aside should that average teacher salary funding be pulled from us, versus spending some of the money on the initiatives and the priorities and actually putting back into place some of the things that we've lost in previous years. I don't think that staff would be remiss and not be fiscally responsible if we didn't recommend that the board be conservative when something is that risky.
Thank you. Trustee Higgins?
And also, I think part of that big $6 million number is our contingency. So, you know, we're talking about slowly chipping away at this number that appears really big, but it's actually not as big as we think it is. And when you take out the contingency, you're looking more at like $3 million, which is on our budget size, you know, pretty close to zero. Mm-hmm. It's a huge budget. It seems like a lot of money, and it is a lot of money.
It's not.
But when we're talking about a huge budget, it's about as close to zero as you can get without, you know, flying too close to the sun. And I appreciate us being on the right side of the ledger than the other side of the ledger and having to make, you know, cuts in the middle of the year. We've been in that position before. And I think one of the things that I will agree that we do suffer from is we're still gun shy from all those years of having to sharpen the pencils in the middle of the year and start drawing lines through the budget. So we budget conservatively, and we are just at this point now with all the decisions that have been made in the last couple of years, along with some of the enrollment growth we're seeing, where we can start being perhaps just a little less conservative. And I think also this year is just bonkers, and I think that's a technical term for accounting for this year in this sector. With the Supreme Court stuff, with the remedies, like, people are figuring this out as they go. Oh, we didn't think about the fact that you're going to continue to hire teachers throughout. We thought that everything was going to be hired by September 30th. Are we going to keep funding you? We don't know. Ask the question, you'll get a different answer next week. And that's because everybody's figuring it out on the fly. So I appreciate that we are being conservative, and I appreciate that these numbers feel big, but you know, there's a whole lot of factors that go into the uncertainty, and it's better to have too much right now than it is to have not enough. It would be a really unfortunate situation. So that's my explanation for it all.
Sure. Secretary Treasurer, did you have something to add, or?
Well, just, I don't know if we finished the comments with regards to surplus, but later on in the agenda, we're talking about financial governance accountability, and we will be talking about the development of a surplus policy that will guide us into the future, so.
Which is important.
Sure. Well, the good news is we're on the positive side of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Could be a lot worse. Is that it? Any other questions for, Trustee Rowley?
Oops. I understand what's being said at the table, but this is like, we're in our fourth year of conservative fiscal restraint. And when we have surplus, I mean, this government's also shown that they've followed through with the requests for additional teacher staffing and then the finances to follow. So I think era of fear is kind of behind us and something that we really shouldn't sit on, you know, fearful laurels for too long. Why not look at the needs of the district? And I mean, there's some things in the budget that are great. Like I noticed the additional EAs, that's great. I've been speaking about that stuff for a while. But when we're talking about, you know, 6 million or 4 million, again, this is the, you know, the last year of our term where we're seeing almost the same number, and it's a surplus, and it's millions, and yet we've had these reductions in these certain areas where, you know, we haven't seen improvements in, and a lot of money has gone from, like, why are we still putting money from operations into capital, for example? Without like, really the ministry hasn't spoke to what any of their plans are in the future when it comes to capital projects. So why would we not consider that there will be, you know, they're looking into that as well?
I'll let Trustee Higginson respond, but my only comment to that would be that the reason we put money into local capital and sufficient money into local capital is because the board has an asset management plan that's been approved, and staff are ensuring that we have funds to proceed with various projects.
So I think Trustee Routley brings up a couple of good points, and as Secretary Treasurer mentioned, we will be working towards a surplus policy, and I think that would be a great opportunity at that time to clearly sort of plan out, if we have a surplus, what are we going to do with it? And I think rather than speaking in terms of dollar values, we can talk in terms of percentages, because our budget changes so much, and thankfully has been going up lately every single year, right? But I think you make a good point. Like, when we have a surplus, let's plow it back into the schools. I think everybody wants to see that. But at the same time, we need to be conservative. We need to have a contingency fund for the what ifs, right? And then the other the thing that you speak to about moving money into local capital. So this has actually been a pet peeve of mine for a while, and that is that the provincial government doesn't really have a capital plan. The districts don't really get, there's no capital funding plan for schools, so we don't get a certain amount of money to build new schools or to seismically retrofit schools. We have to come up with a plan about what school we want to do, and we have to go to the ministry with our hat in our hand and ask and beg for money. And it's very difficult to plan when we're put into a position like that. So one of the things that we do is we do move, sometimes when we have surpluses, we move them into local capital so that we can embark on some smaller capital projects that is of benefit to the school district, to kids in the district. And it's difficult to separate out, gee, you know, hiring teachers is great for kids, but having seismically sound schools is great for kids too. So we're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place on this. So I appreciate your comments, but I think that in part answers some of the questions. Did you have something?
Yeah, thank you through the chair. Just a reminder to the board as well, the last 2 years in a row, at the end of the budget process, meaning at the end of the year, we've been within $100,000 of zero in our operating. And so we have spent and demonstrated that over the last 2 years. The capital that's there is through the sales of property and other types of grants that have come into place. So both years we've also spent money that we've felt in the amended budget period of time and suggested we could spend and still hit the mark of the goal of the board, and the direction from the board was given to spend the operational money within the operational year. In the last 2 years we've demonstrated that. So I think call it what you will at this point in time. I've heard the comment budgets are dynamic, and halfway through a budget such as this, I think us releasing $1 million worth of different into different places represents our attempt to spend the operating, and the intent of the staff is not to have any operational money unspent through this year, and this is our plan to get to that 0 point.
Sure. Trustee Higginson?
So just a couple of things. This year, in the September budget, the amended budget from the government, there's actually $50 million less money in the provincial capital fund than there was at the beginning of the year. So there's actually less money for capital projects this year, and the throne speech indicated that there is no increase in capital money. The only increase in capital that we will see is for playgrounds. So I think it's really wise for us that the ministry has also for years recognized that school districts must save for long-term for projects, and that's why they allow us to put money aside into capital projects. And also some of that money, that surplus money, as was just stated, is from sales of land. It's not ongoing revenue. So it's very difficult for us to hire staff or ongoing positions with money that is not an ongoing source of revenue. We have to be very, very careful with that. And I think finally, this is a mid-year. This is mid-year. This isn't the final number. This isn't how much we're going to have. We have to transfer that $1.9 million into local capital to sit until we know where it's going. That's where it has to sit until we can figure out how we're going to spend it. Those are the rules we have to follow. So we want to keep it there, and then at the end of the year, and hopefully by then we will have our surplus policy in place, and this will become a little bit more of a transparent process. But so far, all the stuff that I've seen has indicated that we are making the right decisions for all those reasons that we just said.
Trustee Rowley?
Well, I was just thinking, I've seen us many years take money from operating and put it into, out of operating into our system, but I haven't seen us pull it back out. Do you know what I mean? So when we're taking 1.9 million and setting it aside, like how many times have we pulled out capital funds for operating within the last 4 years?
Through the chair, and maybe Trustee Brennan can help me, but for years we were supplementing the operating budget with capital up until the last 2 years, I believe, and to the tune of $800,000 to $1 million every year, and that was spent on staffing and salary. So we were taking monies that were generated from rentals and from land dispositions and et cetera, and spending it on that until quite recently.
Trustee Brennan?
Thank you, Chair. Trustee Brewer will recall these painful years of cuts because many of his members experienced layoff during those years. This is new ground for us, having surpluses. And I think we do have to be cautious. The money can be there, and then it cannot be there. The ministry, I think, at one stage, several years ago, made statements about how much surplus money school boards had. I think they thought that there was a Scrooge McDuck in the basement of this board building throwing gold coin in the air and laughing gleefully, and that wasn't the case. So now we do have some surpluses, and I think the documents within this package will assist us in developing a plan to deal with those surpluses. My preference would be to spend it on education. But I don't think you just hire more teachers and then decide what to do with them. I think we need a plan. And I think we need a revised educational plan. We do have a lot of needs. We need to improve graduation rates for all students in the district. I think we need to improve support services for all students in the district. Yes, we do need to improve the structures of our buildings so they're safer and more comfortable for students. But we don't just do it by opening up the vault. So I think the first thing we have to do is to develop a surplus management plan and in collaboration with the ministry. And then we have to develop a revised educational plan so that we can release some of this money to hire staff, to perhaps renovate facilities so that they are different learning facilities for children. And we may need to buy more equipment, more educational equipment as well, including technology. That surplus shouldn't sit there as sort of some kind of badge of excellence for school boards. It should be there for the purpose of, for which it was given to us, and that's for educating children. But I think we need to do it in a planned, methodical way, and make sure that we get the most bang for that money, and that the learning environment for students improves, and all of the outcomes for students in our district is improved.
Thank you. Trustees Vera?
But no, I just want to make a comment back about that, because when we went through the budget cuts, and the statements made at the table is we're doing this to become sustainable. It had nothing to do with the conditions of the buildings, not to do with whether we needed the people that were laid off or not. It was done to reduce the budget so we could become sustainable. And in my view of what we're being had for the last 3 years, and have been announced, is surpluses. It's time to look back and put back what you said, we become sustainable, and put back the places that you cut from, that you made the decision to do for was to become balanced. Nobody said that the work they were doing wasn't valued. And if that was made at this table, I missed it. Because all the discussions were about was becoming sustainable. And when we say we look like we're sustainable, from my point of view, how many millions become sustainable before we start? I'm not asking that the vault opens up and you throw the gold out the door and we don't need it. But look around our buildings. I can say we need it. And if somebody wants to tell me we don't, then I guess we're this. When it's 55 years to paint an inside of a school and we say that looks beautiful, I guess I'm going in with rose-colored glasses. That's what I'm talking about. I'm only asking to put back what the board's decisions were to become sustainable. And as we come out, we look at where we made the cuts in the first place. Most of the decisions that were cut are now back in this district or growing. In some areas they're not. And that's all we've asked from this side of the table when we talk about budget surpluses. When does it become too much?
Superintendent Blaine?
My only piece to that, and thank you for the comments, Mr. Severe, is that there was never any comment that we would return money back to where it came from. There was a comment that we would learn how to spend our money wisely in the new world of what we needed and based on data-driven decision-making. So as we move out of this era, the comments were for us to learn how to spend our money and to ensure that we were moving forward in the direction that we wanted to. But the idea that that there was a suggestion that we were going to put money back exactly where it came from, I don't think was ever discussed at this table.
Trustee Berzovich?
Thank you. I actually sit in the sort of middle in the sense that I see all the sides here. I do fundamentally agree with Trustee Brennan that when we put money back, or as we're figuring out what to do with this money, it has to be systematic. It has to be done with a plan and not just sort of piecemeal throwing money in various areas. So I do want to be thoughtful in how we do that. I do, however, also agree with Mr. Zver in that I've been around our schools and I've seen the conditions in terms, and we do. When we're thinking about putting money back and where we're going to be looking at this money, some of these investments can't just be on the, some of them have to be on the facility side of the ledger. They have to be in terms of, to me, in terms of where we're putting our money is in terms of those types of positions. I do believe we went farther than was wise in some of those cuts. But that was actually not even why I initially raised my hand. Why I initially raised my hand was to ask the question, as I was looking through all these numbers, I got a little lost. I was looking, trying to figure out how are we doing in terms of what do we have in terms of money for continued recruitment of TOCs? Do we, in terms of where I was looking for that, because I know that we are still suffering shortages, and I am concerned because I'm still hearing from principals in my zone that there are days when we are short TOCs and they're being called into classrooms, and SSTs are being called into classrooms, and that's pulling resources away from vulnerable kids. So I have concerns there. So I'd just like to know where we're at with that.
Sure, I'll start through the chair. We're going full steam ahead. We're recruiting, we're sending people out. I'm not sure what the accounts look like, but it's not that money's not holding us back as far as getting out of there. It's about time, but we're hiring weekly We have people in learning services interviewing generally every Friday and et cetera, and full steam ahead. So I do know that just recently we've gone through the bout of flu out there. And so our TTLC list was really taxed recently. So we're certainly not at the level we want to be, but we're still moving forward.
But we
with that.
don't need to recommend moving any money further towards that.
Right now, my understanding is we have the accounts and et cetera. We're moving forward. We received some money from the CEF funding as well, so we're doing fine.
Okay.
Did you want to say?
You know, we've just been very proactive in this regard in terms of attending career fairs. And again, as Superintendent Blaine just said, Learning Services is interviewing on a very regular basis. I want to say it's more often than Fridays, but I think we started this, you know, a year plus ago. So we tried to get ahead of the curve in terms of even some of what other districts were doing. I think we're doing everything and anything we can do, including putting money in the budget and applying for funding from the CEF.
Okay.
Trustee Ray?
Thank you. I think to Mr. Zvier's point, I think that's what his concerns are will be addressed in a surplus policy. That is when we can decide as a board what is important to us, where we think when we do have extra revenue, where it goes and what percentage goes where, and it can just automatically take that. So I think that it, you know, moving forward, when we do get to have our surplus policy in place before the end of the year budget is done, all those concerns that he has will be addressed.
Trustee Solomon?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for your report. I know a lot of work went into it. And again, you know, with the surplus policy, I think it has to be, but the district's always evolving, and I think that we always need to consider and reconsider how we use our resources. That's the biggest part of our role here, and so I think that's what we do, and that's just the process. It's all good.
Trustee Higginson?
I'd like to move the recommendation.
Do we have a seconder? We have several seconders. I'll go with Bill Robinson.
He was second.
Would you like to speak to it?
I just think it makes sense. I think we've had some good discussion here. I think though we've kind of wavered a little bit. I think it was worthwhile discussion. I think it's important, and I think it will tie into what's happening later on, but it was a great report. We know where everything is. It was very clear to me, and I look forward to seeing what the final numbers end up being at the end of the year. I also really appreciate the work you guys have done. You came into this sector in such a fantastic year to join. So thank you for keeping your head above water and keeping us on the right side of the ledger.
And I just want to add to that really appreciate your presentations and the way you present the numbers, minus all of the page flipping, of course, but yeah, it's very good. Thank you very much. Is there anybody who's opposed to the motion? Let's put it that way.
Good question.
Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Trustee Routley is opposed. Okay, moving on to the next.
One comment?
Sure.
I just want to make one comment that at this special meeting on February 21st, the board will be looking at two motions. One will be to do all three readings of the amended bylaw in that meeting, and that would need to be carried unanimously. So I just noted that this wasn't carried unanimously, but when it actually goes to the board, that motion will need to...
Just the one motion.
Just that one motion will need, and we'll separate them out, but it'll
yeah.
need to be carried unanimously.
Yes.
Well, it doesn't.
Yeah, otherwise we need to schedule another meeting.
It doesn't necessarily, it's not a must. I mean, it doesn't have to be unanimous. It just has to be unanimous to be all done in that one evening.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Correct,
Yes.
yes.
In the end.
That's what I meant,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so we'll move on to item 8.2. Superintendent Blaine will present 2018 and 19 projections and the 2018-19 local
God.
school calendar.
Okay, so thank you, and through the chair. I believe you have a larger, the board has
good.
a larger piece than page 9 in the...
On page what?
The smaller version is it on page 9? But you have a larger version like this?
Yeah, there's a
in the white-
freestanding one.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
Oh.
underneath. So again, while Ms. Sutton was taking coffee breaks from the budget, she generated this for us. And it was a first time through for her, so observing her worksheets and et cetera was exciting for me to watch it being looked at very, very differently through the financial eyes. But thank you for the work, Tanya. So during her process, just to let you know, we looked at the ministry numbers that were suggested for next year, the district numbers that were generated from the schools, from principals, and the Beauregard numbers. And again, as we move forward with projections, we want to look at the whites of the eyes, and then we want to look at certain trends that we were able to note, and then we did some averaging as well, so that we came out. So to let you know, Beauregard process, that is an external formula-driven piece, is around 360 students for the next couple of years of increase. So last year, when we did this process, we suggested that we should budget, and so this budget, these projections will establish the working budget that we will be using to establish next year's budget. And we're suggesting that we look at an additional 155 students from this year to next year, which is approximately half of what Beauregard is suggesting. And that's identical to what we did last year. And so by doing that, we will, the significant increases, just to let you know the variances, is that the VAST programs had been based on approximately 127 students for the previous 4 or 5 years. And this year we are now raising it up because it's been increasingly getting stronger and stronger in around the 170 level for students. So we're suggesting that we boost that up to 150 this year. We increased some of the secondary schools to meet the 150 quota, but for our elementary schools, we really focus on the whites of the eyes because that's what we have to staff our schools at, and we're quite clear with that. So that in turn brought us out to what we're suggesting within the district numbers of 155 more students this year than last year. Now, if you look out into the future in 2019, 2021, you will see a significant jump next year of 512. Well, if we come in over 155, then that 512 will drop. We had to move the extra, that's a Beauregard number, and we had to move the extra numbers from this year that we weren't counting into next year. It's just an accounting process of those students. So if we come in at 300 this year, you'll see that 512 drops back down to the 350 area that we're suggesting is what we're averaging over time. So as I said, these numbers will establish our numbers for the working budget. We feel that we can work within that to staff our schools and allowing the board to also work through the different budgetary items that we have in budget strategies and get us well underway. The below comments around the special ed columns underneath the second block of numbers, so level 1, 2, and 3, these are all supplemental funding and et cetera. We don't consider them within the budget process per se, and we don't send that into the ministry. So those are standard numbers that we've just brought forward every year, and they're pretty consistent, and we just work off of that. So the important section is the second section down called September enrollment count, school age basic allocation, and that's the number of the plus or minus for us as we move forward. So that'll be the recommendation that we put forward to the ministry, and I open it up for conversation.
Trustee Berzevic.
Thank you. My favorite, I always have questions about Beauregard, and still, 3 years later, I'm still trying to make sure I completely understand it. How quickly can Beauregard, or does Beauregard, how quick does it catch up to things like all the big developments in Lily Valley and, you know, and Cinnabar, how quickly can they catch that?
As quickly as we put it in and or the city puts it in.
Okay.
So they draw off of the different databases around for their information around growth and et cetera. And then we also have the ability, and we normally do it October and November, of making any specific community shifts that we feel. And Pete, did I miss anything on that, with that one, with Beauregard?
Yeah, there's two main components to Beauregard. One is it's based on the existing students and calculating migration rates, promotion rates, et cetera, physical data. And then there's the option for us to put local data in, which could include new developments, et cetera, that aren't currently existing in the system, but will have a significant impact on them.
Yeah. And we update it from our end in October and November, I think, each year, after September 30th.
Yeah, we send the September 30th data to Beauregard, and then we receive it sometime in late November, early December.
Yeah. So this is the newest that we have.
Okay.
Yeah. But you're always dealing a year or so behind.
Because again, this does feel very conservative to me, based on just what I see with my eyes when I drive around town.
Yeah, and I would agree with you. What I see with my eyes is constant growth, but it was an interesting conversation just earlier. It's not necessarily equating into students of school age.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Any other, go ahead. Sure, go.
Well, there's phenomenal infilling in Nanaimo.
Pardon?
There's phenomenal infilling in Nanaimo. But it's, and the people who are here are people building for people who are coming here. That's who's here now. And people who are coming here are generally older. And are not of childbearing age, so they're coming. They've cashed out in Toronto or Vancouver or Montreal, and they're coming here for the lifestyle, the cost of housing, and the weather. So we are talking, and that is an issue for me. Is that personally, I would like this community to be more family friendly, encourage people to have children. The only way you can do that is to make it more affordable. I was reading in The Guardian the other day that it costs $32,000 American just to birth a child in the United States. That's not the lifelong cost of raising a child. That's just to have that child born in the hospital. So, and I imagine it's not that way here because we have a healthcare program that provides that service. But the cost of raising children is still very high, and not having childcare, services really doesn't encourage people to have children. And that's what we need as a school district. That's our fuel, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, I mean, I would like to see all communities in this country encourage people to raise families, to have families, and to make it affordable for them to do that.
Exactly.
Any other questions about projection for enrollment? I just want to say it's fortuitous that we're having our meeting today because I noticed that the deadline to have this in is no later than tomorrow. So that works. Thank you.
We can't help it.
Good timing. Moving on to my second item, which would be the local school calendar. Please turn to page 40 and 41. And so as I'll just refresh the board that last week we dealt with the addition of the May 10th into this year's school calendar. And then this week we will be looking at specifically year 2018-19, and I'm looking on page 41. And we just had the release. This calendar will include the new Family Day adjustment and again an additional instructional curriculum day generated by the ministry. And there's a couple of edits that we did as we went through it again, so please use this chart as the amended chart coming forward to you. But the important pieces that, as the board would normally deal with, is that below you'll see 6 days of professional development and or curricular days on the bottom: October 4, 5, 9, October 19th, February the 25th and 26th, and May the 10th. Those have all been vetted through Netsmatalak and the NDTA, and also you had a representative from the board at that group. And so we are suggesting that this will be the calendar for next year, and we're looking for board approval that we can move it forward for the board approval at the end of the month, so we can have it in on time to the ministry. We've also put year 19 and 20 there, but it's a TBD. That'll be amended as we go on.
Sure, so we have a motion recommendation, moved by trustee Burzovich, seconded by trustee Brennan. Did you want to speak to it?
No, if it's been gone through, that's never pronounced it. Nuts Mud Cadillac. If it's gone through them and they're good with it, yeah.
So we do have a question from our stakeholder group, so should we take the motion off the table?
Sure.
Okay, trustee. All night long.
Pretend trustee.
My only question was, is I know we weren't part of the school calendar process, and I don't know if that was an oversight, but I think when our last person left the committee, we were never asked to have somebody rejoin.
Oh.
So we were not part of the school calendar at all, and yet we're supposed to be.
Okay.
I just want to raise that as a concern.
Oversight.
That's definitely an oversight, and we will get that corrected.
Yep. Thank you.
Sure, should we bring it back on the table? That's all you had there?
Anything else?
It's more than enough, I guess.
Through the chair, I'll meet with Mr. Severe, see if there's any issues, and I'll have them represented for the final reading at the board meeting.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure, so motion to bring it back on the table?
Sure, but I also have a question.
Sure, seconded. All right, all in favor, let's do it. Okay. Trustee Higginson.
Hold on a sec. You gotta let Karen grasp what you just
It's going to
said.
parent consult.
Yeah,
Is it
that's
not?
what I was just gonna say. My question
It's not
is,
going to the board at the end of the month, it's going for a parent for 30 days, and we'll bring it to the board.
The next board meeting.
We'll bring it to business next month.
Thank you, we have a month to do
yeah,
this.
it doesn't have to be until March 31st.
Okay.
So
Question?
just to, because that's kind of quiet, that it will go out to our, to the community and our partner groups for consultation on it. It's not a done deal yet, so people have lots of time to provide feedback, so I encourage QP, apologies for the oversight on that. There's been lots of changes on Pro D this year, so lots of new paces and stuff like that. So if, you know, this is a draft, and I just want to point out that I'm going to own a little bit of an awkward thing in October. I'll point it out to people that there is, you know, 3 professional learning days in October, but that's because I was a bit of a dog with a bone about having the 2 professional learning days. 2 professional learning days back to back are great. The whole committee agrees. They're really great for having rich learning. And rather than having the 2 in September come back for a week and then having Thanksgiving, it felt like it seemed to make more sense for families in the community to have Thursday and Friday before the Thanksgiving weekend, so it becomes an extra long weekend. So it's awkward, and I put it out there to people. I pointed out in case there's feedback from people that they would rather it be in September and not have that. I don't put it out to us to talk about right now. I'm just making a point of it to the community and to partner groups to pay attention to that, and if it's awkward, then I'll lose that battle and wear it because I own it.
So just to perform a little bit of housekeeping, since we have a motion that's been made and seconded, can we have a motion to postpone until the next business committee?
Well, isn't the motion to recommend it to go to consultation?
Yes.
That's what.
Oh,
So
is
it
it?
can go
Oh,
to the
okay.
public for 30 days.
To go, to
Okay.
put it out to consultation. So
Oh,
we're-
okay.
Superintendent's undertaking to consult with Mr. Stewart,
Yeah,
and then changes to be made for the final iteration.
it's March business
Yeah, I
committee,
don't think we would need a motion for that, but, okay.
No.
Right, anybody else have any questions or would like to speak to the motion, recommendation? All right. Trustee Burzovich?
I just want to say, I actually like what you've done in October, and I think that may very well be well received.
We'll see. I know it's awkward and it makes October, I recognize makes October hard for teachers in terms of regulation of students when they're out of school so much, and also perhaps for families, but we'll see. I welcome the feedback on that possibility.
All those in favor of the motion? Any objections? Motion is carried unanimously. Thank you, Superintendent Lane. Next, item 8.3, Secretary Treasurer McVeigh will speak to financial governance and accountability. Recommendations from the ministry?
I'm just smiling because we have pages 43 through 173 on financial accountability and governance. Yes. Well, essentially, the Ministry of Education, as you're all aware, established a working group, and there are expectations of school boards in respect of financial governance and accountability. There are a number of requirements, expectations that are supposed to be in place by June 30th, 2018, or at least in progress. So without taking you through pages 43 to 173, there was an attachment that I provided later in the day, and it's separate, so it should be at the back of your package. And if you just look past the first document that says Staffing and Finance Committee, Terms of Reference, what I want you to do is just go to page 1 of 9. It's an evaluation and progress report where I took the various expectations and broke them down, and for you just kind of did an evaluation in terms of what we currently have in place in respect of these expectations. So you'll see that we actually have a number of governance policies and admin procedures, practices in place with regards to budget monitoring and reporting, audit internal control procedures, so a number of the different expectations that are in place. And then the next column over action plan is, I guess, where we need to start going next. What is it that we need to have put in place? In the action sheet in the package, I suggested the next thing we work on is a surplus policy, and that's something that we could bring to the business committee in March in terms of what a template policy would look like. But maybe I'll just open it up for discussion because there's just so much information in this package.
Sure, Trustee Brennan.
I appreciate this because I know it's March 31st were some of the deadlines, and clearly that would be difficult given the 2 weeks of March is devoted to relaxation. So this timeline plan, I think, fits the needs of us and the requirements of the ministry. It's realistic. You know, we can perhaps have a special meeting or two and focus on 1 or 2 of these and get them done by June 30th. So thank you very much for this.
Trustee Higginson?
Yeah, I agree. I thought March was a bit aggressive, as we've been talking about being conservative. So, but I also like that there was something from BCSTA in here about them providing support documents or something like that as well. So I think it gives us, these timelines give us time to have, I know that they're working on a package for this particular issue.
You shouldn't throw this package away.
No, don't throw. Can we not print this all out again for like the 42nd time?
Yeah, just hang on to it.
We've had it on our agenda, so let's keep it, everyone. Package.
So,
and I think that the timelines you laid out are good, and I look forward to seeing some sample policies for us to work on.
a couple comments. So there are a couple of sample surplus policies that are included in here. One is from Saanich, which they voted on in January, and I don't know if it passed or not, but it's pretty brief. I think ours should be a little bit more detailed with some terms of reference and definitions, and a real opportunity to kind of explain to the public what is an accumulated surplus as opposed to an operational surplus. How do we move money to local capital? What is it used for? So I think this is a real learning opportunity, and to try to make the process transparent and put in place certain key things that we think are important about how the surplus should be spent and how much should be reserved for insurance purposes for the coming year. I was a little concerned when I received this document, and the reason I was concerned was because I thought the ministry had lost an opportunity. So they've gone out and they've asked 60 school districts to come up with their own surplus policy, and I thought that they could have had an opportunity to put a template out, and then all 60 school districts would have fallen along similar lines with similar terms and similar definitions, and perhaps adjusted it to fit their local needs. But you would have some consistency, and now instead I think they're going to get 60 different answers to their question. And so I'm happy that the BC STA is going to be putting out some reference material for this, because I think that will be helpful. And I would suggest that the business committee is a little too structured for this kind of work, and that perhaps we have a working group session where we devote some time in an more informal way to putting down what we think the audit committee should look like and what the surplus policy should look like. Trustee Brennan?
Yeah, Chair, we can just go into committee of the whole, which relaxes the rules of order so that we don't need a motion on the table and we can speak, you know, around about the issues. We did have an audit committee. It was comprised, I think, of 3 trustees. Staff may want to look at the background of that and see if any of the terms of reference or history of that group obtains for this new version.
Sure. Any other thoughts or comments? I did do a little bit of research into this. There was an appendix that they did not include in their submission, and I found it at one of the school districts, but it had this accumulated surpluses, and it had a number of surplus data for all 60 school districts. And you'll see in your package, I made a couple of graphs just to show where our district lies compared to all of the other districts. And I think that you'll note that we're right in the middle of the pack for most of where we're at for accumulated surpluses, and that's a really good place to be. We don't have a lot of percentage of our operating budget tied up in surplus, so that's a positive thing. And some of the school districts actually look kind of scary, but be that as it may.
Ministry's hands.
Yes. Any other comments or questions? Okay, we look forward to doing this work.
I just wanted to say I really appreciate the effort you're putting in here, Scott, to help us find a solution here to this. So, nice job.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to items 8.4. Director of Planning and Operations, Mr. Pete Sabo, will present on Frank J. Ney expansion update and an NDSS turf field update.
Thank you. Thank you. I have 2 presentations tonight. Updating Frank J. Ney and NDSS. So we'll start with Frank J. Ney, and please, if you have any questions as we go along, please interrupt. I'll get into more detail, but with respect to budget and schedule, the current costs are forecast to be below budget for the project, so things are going well in that respect. Construction details, I'll report out a little bit more. Work is proceeding within scope, and it's moving along quite well. Completion schedule, we did complete the parking last September, and currently the schedule's completion is set for July 20th, and I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. There's a couple of things going on there. I wanted to make a note. I had a chance to talk to the principal today and asked her if she had anything that she might like me to relay. And she indicated that the model we chose with a construction manager has really allowed, from her perspective, to better integrate activities on site with the contractor's activities. And I'll reference John Blaine and my experience at NDSS, where we also used that model as well when we did a project in 2000. So it's one that's viable still viable, and has allowed us to, as I said, with significant cooperation on the site, the best opportunity to minimize disruption and enhance the schedule advancements. So here's one of our drone shots. Thanks, Dale, for this information. Providing a great perspective of the building, and you can see the new parking lot divided, the new exit from the parking lot with a right-left turn lane to improve traffic and flow. 18 parking stalls, and you can see the new building constructed in the background. Get you a good sense of the site. So I'll just walk through a couple of elements. So alterations to the exit and entry off Williamson Road, additional parking to accommodate increased traffic and staff. This isn't the work in progress. This is the work that was happening last summer. And so part of the building was built on piles. So the south side was on piles because of the depth of the good soil. And the north side was built in strip footings. So you can see the work, the form work proceeding for the strip footings. You can see the base foundations now on top of the grade beams and the strip footings. You can see now the slab getting prepared with rebar going in, and then on the right hand side the slab having been formed
You can now get an idea of the footprint of the school. And then, of course, it's a wood frame building with concrete in between for sound, in between the floors, and you can see it start going up. At the very front where that high wall is, that's a stairwell at the end of the building. You can see the elevator access starting to rise out of the foundation, and the level 2 framing going into place. And so this becomes more recent photos, I believe, of last Saturday. So we're at the point now where they're starting to look at putting the roof on. And that's a significant point for us to seal the building up, to make sure that the weather's not going to slow us down. So progress on the site's been good the last few days, threats of snow, but none showing up. This is the detailed schedule, and this is one of those slides. I just took a course, a little segment on public speaking. They said, never do this. Never put up a slide that...
Unreadable slide?
The unreadable slide. And I kind of disagree in a sense, because it allows you to talk about the bigger issue of the schedule rather than get lost in the detail when we do this. But I do want to focus in on some detail, the very bottom right-hand side. And I'll show you the snippet here. So you can see, this is the very bottom right. And down here is that date I quoted at the beginning, July 20th. Now this is completion of deficiencies. So this is essentially when the contractor packs up the last truck and starts to drive off the site. This isn't when the district can actually hold tours, see finished rooms, start to move equipment into the building. That item is somewhere around mid-June. And we're working with the contractor to advance that date even more. So this gives us an opportunity to make sure that before school's out, we can take care of as many items as we can when staff are still on site before they leave for the vacation. And we're working with the principal with respect to schedules to put that together. And again, we're working with the principals on setup planning of the school. And as I said, that encompasses plans before the summer break, and then plans what we're going to do during and what we're going to do after to accommodate all the activities that are required. We're working with the School Consolidation Working Group to make sure that they're updated, that we're getting their feedback. We provide, we've had 4 meetings, we provide construction updates to every one of the meetings. We're also aligning our planning for the required changes within the school and for changes because we're receiving students from Rutherford. So there's a few adjustments in the school, like a Strong Start's coming over. That's not going in the new addition. We have to make a few alterations in the existing school over the summer to make those things happen. With respect to communications, we're having monthly site meetings, and we invited the principal to attend those site meetings. They're detailed construction meetings, but it gives the principal an indication of all the depth of detail, and so she can understand the activities that are going into completing the project. We're continuously monitoring when and how we deliver construction-related communications to PAC and staff. So we're checking in through principals, checking in with the PACs through the School Consolidation Working Group, and managing that. We're also providing updates at the School Consolidation Group, and then we're having periodic construction updates via the district website. And I couldn't tell you how often that happens. That's Magic Dale. Every time I look, there's different stuff going up there, so thank you for that. I want to talk a little bit about playground equipment. It's not directly related to the construction, but it is an item of concern. So we're working with Frank J. Ney to expand the primary play area with emphasis on accessibility, outdoor musical instruments, etc. Mike Ross of the facilities office had a chance to meet with the PAC playground group at Frank J. Ney, and talking a little bit about what we could do at the front of the school, considering that the portables are going to remain on the site. Did I see a hand go up? No? Okay. And so you'd see we're talking about moving the emergency kiosk, consolidating some concrete tables and benches into Area 2, looking at some accessible play equipment through a route access to the back of the gym, that's Area 3, and then we're looking at reorienting the mini soccer posts out in Area 4 that were disrupted by the placement of the portables. That's down at the bottom of the page. Out at the back of the school, we're looking at replacing, updating the existing equipment in Area 1, expanding some hard surface areas out at the back of the school where the new sort of working entrance of the school will be. we expect a lot of student movement through that entry, exit, over to the play areas next door. Then out in Area 3, there's a new asphalt play court with basketball nets. And then in Area 4, we're doing a little work to reconnect the walkway for the community. And so because of the way the topography is, we have to connect that upper walk area with the actual walkway around the school and then spread them out again. So we're just doing the minimum to sort of modify in that area. So with respect to the playground, we're continuing to work with the SCWG and Frank Genet, and working closely now with the school and the PAC on their specific plan to upgrade the equipment. So we've got a general strategy, now we're going to drill down. We considered the use or partial use of Rutherford surplus play equipment, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And we're considering items to be delivered via the construction contract. So, you know, there may be some items that they want to do with the PAC playground that, because we have contractors on site, will simply extend their contract. There could be items that district forces contribute to that as well. So we'll take advantage of those expertises. And then finally, we finalized a plan for the play equipment at Rutherford, and there's essentially 4 pieces of equipment. There's a larger wooden set of equipment that's reached the end of its life. There's a metal geodesic dome, and the plan is to remove those after the school closes in June. There's 2 newer pieces of metal equipment, a larger sort of multi-purpose, and then a swing set. And they're about the same vintage. And we considered moving those to Frank Genet, and we talked to the school consolidation working group about that, and it was about $32,500 to relocate those 2 pieces of equipment. And the working group put forward a request to staff to consider leaving those newer pieces of equipment at Rutherford. And so through the discussions, the cooperative discussions on the committee, it was agreed that we would contribute the $32,500 for the relocation to make available to the Frank Genet PAC group to help augment play equipment. And so we're going to work with them with that 32 and any other money they bring to upgrade their play equipment. And we're also going to look for other ways to deliver improvements to the playground around the site. An associated item, and I was corrected today, it's not technically a Safe Walk program, and I don't have the title. That's a simplification. It's a Safer Routes to School, Active Routes to School program, and I'll change the title for the next one. Essentially, we are well into the program now, and it is for the 3 schools affected by the closure of Rutherford, and Departure Bay was added due to traffic concerns expressed to the city and the school district. And so that's underway. The 3 schools at the top are a little bit ahead in the schedule because we're wanting to make sure that those are completed for the closure. And Departure Bay is slightly behind, but we're going to make up some time on that later. I also wanted to indicate that we're working with the city on potentially expanding that program and continuing it on for 18-19 and 19-20 to look at addressing all the schools in the district on a priority basis. The leads of the program are Jamie Rose, manager of transportation for the city, Lise Richard, who works for Haste, the company who's looking after the program, and then Chris Baker from my office is working on that as well. And that's it.
Great. Trustee Brad, have you been in touch with Canadian Tire yet, Mr. Siegel?
I have not. However, I am meeting tomorrow with Trustee Robinson and the PAC chairs from McGirr and Georgia, at Georgia, to talk a little bit about that program at Georgia. Yeah.
And we contracted with Pacific Sport to develop an active transportation initiative, of which I would think that the Safe Walk project would be one. I just wonder if they're not doing that, what are they doing?
Yeah. So the active transportation and the Safe Walk aren't exactly the same program. And with respect to the services, the Pacific Sport, I think I'll refer that question over to the superintendent or the assistant superintendent.
Through the chair, and I'm looking over at Ms. Gray at the same time. I can take a shot at it. I think you've had the most recent conversation?
Not necessarily lately, but okay. I do know that we engaged Haste. I think Pete, Mr. Sable, for the very purpose that they were definitive in what they were going to do in those four schools at the time?
And then just further to that, Mr. Cooper will be working on the educational side of it to incorporate the learnings, lesson plans, and/or however we're going to operationalize it within for the students themselves. And that'll be his pieces he picks out of. So this will be the technical side and the walk routes and the city owning some of the website design and things like that for that communication. And then there's this in-school part component that Mr. Cooper.
I'm just curious what the project budget is currently estimated to be for this project?
The project budget is approximately $6.7 million.
Thank you.
That's not the Safe Walk program.
It's expensive.
Oh, for the Safe Walk or the?
No. The NAY project. Yeah, that was a lot, very expensive. The $1 million walk. Any other questions for Pete? Trustee?
I don't know if this is a question for Peter, a question through the board, or through you to the Secretary Treasurer, but I'll throw it out there. In terms of the budget, one of the things I had asked for in the fall, I believe, was a detailed breakdown in terms of I've had multiple questions from various community members. We have this blanket bulk number from where the share of 1.3, I believe, was the share from the ministry from the Wellington project, and the remainder was from our lost the word, local capital, but not excluded.
Restricted?
What's the word? I've lost the word.
Restricted?
Restricted, thank you. But a breakdown of what pots of money that came from, what people are asking, and they believe as as taxpayers and members of the public that they have a right to know, and we have an obligation to be transparent as to which projects have been moved around to do that.
Through the chair, what we could do is, our Director of Planning and Operations, I believe, has the budget on him and is asking our Director of Communications to put it up. So this information has been shared with the school Consolidation Working Committee, and we could talk about the numbers. Is that what you're doing?
Yes.
Put up?
Yeah. And so, as Secretary Treasurer indicated, we were asked and did share this at the committee. So budget 6.716852, quite specifically, and the areas it's made up of are 4.6 of local capital and 1.916582 of restricted, and that restricted was made up of about 1.3 of funding, previous ministry restricted funding, and then at the time, just prior to tender award, we asked for an additional 590 to be added. And in discussion with the ministry, that was due to the additional classrooms that we designed into the school, and because we were considering the impacts of SCC, et cetera, on the project. And then we also allocated 125 of energy initiative funding. So what we did was we took a look at the heating system and said that heating system is about 20% more efficient than a standard heating system, which is less expensive. So we could have gone to a cheaper system, but we didn't. And so we're using some initiative funding to help with that cost. And then we set aside $75,000 worth of annual facilities grant funding because we were upgrading some existing systems, fire alarm and PA systems within the school, which weren't part of the actual addition. So that's the funding and some of the rationale.
But I guess to follow, what I'm trying to get at is that specifically the 1.9 restricted, what other projects people are asking, are projects not being funded as a result, and that's what people are wondering. And I don't know how to deal with, because I keep getting questions, so I can respond. Okay. Yeah.
You want to go?
Peter, do you want to go? You want me to go?
Are you specifically asking about the restricted capital, the 1.9?
Yes, specifically.
Okay, so we had $1.3 million ministry restricted from the Wellington project that the ministry could have actually taken back if they had wanted. And instead, we asked if we could have that money, and they unrestricted it.
Okay.
For the use directly because of our business case for Frank Ney.
Right.
And then in addition to that, we had separate monies that were ministry restricted within our capital budget. And it wasn't earmarked for anything in particular. But for example, when we do sale of property, sometimes the ministry restricts a portion of it, and a portion of it is unrestricted, depending on how the asset was sourced to begin with, or purchased. So if the ministry contributed any portion, when you go to sell an asset years later, the ministry can choose to restrict a portion of that money. So we had a small amount sitting there, probably from sales in previous years. And we wrote a letter to the ministry asking to have it unrestricted specifically for this project, at which they did. In terms of local capital, that's a fund of money that we have. And although we might identify various projects that we would like to do in our local capital, there are ebbs and flows in terms of money that is expended out of that fund for projects, and we may not use it for the projects that we've actually identified it for. It's one of those things that moves as we move with our projects.
Superintendent Blaine?
Is there a specific project that that your community is concerned about?
Well, truthfully, I think what it is because there have been a few people who would ask that we would make a motion protecting Rutherford from sale. That there's concerns that there, and I want it clearly put on the table.
Concerns as to what?
That Rutherford, that there's something going on, that we will be selling Rutherford in the near future. And I just want to make sure we clearly put it on the table that there are no plans in the near future to be doing anything with Rutherford property. None of this money is.
Point of order, Chair.
Yeah.
This is a closed item.
Fair enough. Okay, so thank you. Yeah, I'm just trying to kill things that are going, kill rumors. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Done. All right, that's all I need to say.
Trustees here. Rob.
Gonna give you a seat. Hopefully you were listening to the Premier when he said they're replacing playground equipment for schools to be back online, and I think your pitch with Rutherford would probably, Pat, being that it's hard to remove that stuff to get the funding for Frank Ney and Randerson because of the savings and stuff with those.
Nice job,
Standing
Rob.
in line quickly.
Nice job, Rob.
Yes, thank you. And so I saw the announcement as well. And as always, some of what we have to do is in the details of the ministry's announcement as to where they're trying to target the money and how we apply, et cetera. And none of that's been released yet. And so when we receive that, we'll attempt to take full advantage of that funding.
So Pete, I wanted to say thank you for your presentation and your Gantt chart, which shows how complex the projects are and how many moving parts that go into these things. So really appreciate your work, and I.
Public speaking is
I'm going to pass that on. There were so many things they said that I shouldn't do that I do that they said don't.
You should teach the course.
Oh, you have to do the fields.
with small numbers.
So Karen, can I advance this? One of the things they said is I can move around from the podium, don't stand and have a conversation with people. So I'll attempt to do that. But not too far because it's safe over there. So at NDSS, I'm very pleased to show the NDSS field. And Mike and I were trying to determine what exactly to say. So we got a little bit of a tour for you. So of course, again, the ever-present drone shots, which I have to say we're really finding from a planning perspective very useful from us, and we're putting a lot of requests into Dale to help us with these documents. So it's a partnership, and I just want to recap. It's a jointly funded, school district constructed, city operated facility. So the handshakes happen, although there are some deficiencies I'll talk about. The construction's essentially complete. It's being used for what it's intended to, and the city is operating the facility. And so we've gone through that process of of doing it. And so there's, if you haven't been out, there's a look at the sign. That's sort of their marquee boards. There's 2 of them.
How come we're the bottom?
I was going to ask that question, but I didn't.
Not a mountain.
Isn't it? Yeah. I could say that the City of Nanaimo staff ordered the signs and had them installed. I do know that much. It is just high level. It is a 10-year license to the city, as you're aware. The school access is from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. on days when school's in session, and then city access for all those other times. Couple of features, again, for those who maybe didn't get around, we did add a new lighted sidewalk from the north, that's Roxman parking lot, all the way past the pool, the NAC, down to the main student entrance to the field. And so that sidewalk wasn't poured and the fence down for like 10 minutes when there weren't students on it trying to get off that access road. There's a significant number of students up and down that access road. So it continues on, and we're looking, there's a place where it narrows at the north end, and we're going to connect those two, the sidewalk up with the place where the field gets very close to the sidewalk.
Trustee Burzovich has it.
That looks,
Yes.
this looks really good. I took a drive around myself to try to figure out the accessibility and stuff. That dirt area there,
Yeah.
in that picture you just pointed out, will we be putting any kind of plantings or anything in there, or it's just gonna stay dirt? Or?
So it's one of the deficiencies that the contractor has to complete, and they're going to hydro seed it, essentially. So it's going to be grass.
Okay.
And as part of the operating committee, we are starting to move into sort of, Richard and I, Parks and Rec Director, have been talking about master planning and working together on improvements for the site. So that's starting to come together, but we have been dealing with sort of the more immediate issues of getting things operating. So you can see here, up by the NAC, down by this access road, we have this new and improved speed bump item crosswalk for students, so they can, in public, they can come out down this wide sidewalk at the NAC, they come across this new marking, and then down into the this is the emergency access. It's got knocked down bollards, so in the it does happen, accidents happen, people get hurt playing on the field, and then that's where the ambulances come in to get to the field. So.
Trustee Brown has a
Just to see, will there be lighting behind the aquatic center? They're having incidents of
I believe Richard's looking at that. There is lighting along here. It's not the bollards, the lighting standards haven't been put in yet, the controls and all of that, but there is lighted access along here. And they will be on photo cells, so they'll go on all night, so whenever it's, and they'll be on the city's bill. So on separate hydro meter. I'll talk about that because I don't have a slide on it. These are one of the technical details. So we feed the lighting system and all the systems for the field from NDSS. Because at the time we were upgrading the dust extractor system and we were feeding a new service over into the wood shop, we doubled it so that we could feed the lights. And so it saved that cost on the project. There is a meter in there, and so we had to get the meter registered because we're essentially a reseller of electricity to the city. And so we will read the meter and rebill them for any of the uses for the field. What you can see here down on the bottom is the bleacher pad we spoke about previously, and on it are not the permanent bleachers. These are the temporary bleachers that city has brought over. They were doing some rearrangement of bleachers and they had some temporary, so they brought 4 sections over. Up here is the raised crosswalk that's going to go in across, and the new letdown for handicap accessibility on the NDSS side. And there's some catch basin work for drainage, and then there's accessibility straight up out to the field. So this is where most of the students access the field from the back of NDSS. And we put a walkway in from behind the not the change areas, the players' benches, officials area, over to the back of the grandstands where the washrooms are. And so there's men's and women's washrooms and 2 change rooms. And more than on one occasion, Richard Harding has indicated what a benefit having those washrooms in that location are to the field. Because it's essentially like they're custom built And so they've been decoupled from the track and field operation and sort of more coupled now to the synthetic field operation. So we're working with city staff with respect to locks and timing and cleaning and, you know, when they're open, when they're closed. We want to resist the transient nature sometimes, but make sure they're open for the public. And so those are some of the things we're working through.
Trustee Borzovich.
Oh, sorry,
Yes.
sorry, that perception. I'm guessing that, of course, there's the bleachers at Brewery Bowl.
The back of the bleachers.
Back of the bleachers. So is that all then paved and flat to go around to the front? Because that looks like some pretty good, impressive access. I just want to say I'm impressed. In terms of accessibility, it looks like a person could wheel all the way to the front. Is that, would I be accurate?
To the, from
along here.
From the pool area, from over
Yeah.
at the neck, over all the way to the washroom?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's
And
impressive.
around to the
No,
front side.
Yes, yeah.
Yes, and it's all seamless, and I'm not saying when they get into the washroom how accessible it is.
No, but just
but
that it's
we'll
seamless
fix
to
that.
get there.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yes, yeah, and that was probably the biggest key theme for Richard and I of items missed or missing or things we could add to the budget to make sure that the public was well served by the facility. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no, it's really well connected.
Trustee Bob has a question.
Have you decided on a name for this field?
Well, I think that for now, the name on the sign is the NESS Community Field. And until something intervenes in that name, I think that's, early on, I did have a discussion with Richard Harding about the possible naming of the field, and it was during, you know, an intense time of getting things done with construction, et cetera, and then we started to compare the city's policy for naming facilities and the district's policy for naming facilities, and we went, wow, that's, you know, to be honest, that's a lot of work in organization. We had our focus on the success of this project and getting it in place. So it wasn't something we put to the forefront. It's still possible to address, but at this point.
Pete, your idea of the Pete Sabo Field still is a good one as far as I'm concerned.
I've got another thought. Over here, is the old half of the tennis court. So it's one of the tennis courts.
Like half tennis?
We moved the portable. That used to be the laydown area for the CTC program. And then we moved the portables through all the shuffle for moving the CTC and getting the portables off the field to make room for the synthetic. We ended up putting portables on the other side. So this is now vacant, and we're looking at as a high priority item in AFG to rebuild that play court for the school. So we're working with Jeff, who happens to be here today, and his staff to identify what attributes we want to put on that area. And so we'll consider that for a high priority. So you can see here new covered players benches, nice metal benches with a shelf up for bags and this overhang. There's a secondary overhang that comes down in front. The architect calls it a sneeze guard, but it's just to keep the rain out from a number of dimensions. I went in there and said this is a pretty substantial looking facility. Richard Harding said that this is something they haven't seen. This is a nicer design than they've managed to afford. He said that's the joint nature of the project, that you can get these things in it. So it's quite something. There's a covered scorekeeper area with a water fountain. The water fountain is freeze-proof, so when it's not being used, the water drops down below 18 inches, and then when you press the button, it just takes an extra, couple of seconds for the water to reach the top. So there's fresh water for anybody using the field any time of day. And I'll talk a little bit about this scorekeepers area. So Mike's done a great job here. He's taken pictures of all of the lines to give us an idea. So there's orange CFL lines, although we don't have all the CFL lines down because we just basically have hash marks so that we could line it with removable paint in the future. We have red for rugby. We have blue for lacrosse. You can see in here. We have white for football and yellow for soccer. And those are essentially all the lines in the field. Now, we can put temporary lines for any other sport or event, and they can be washed
field
off.
hockey or like field hockey.
Something.
Trustee Ray has a
Yes.
Excuse me. Some parents have, who go, their kids go to NDSS have said to me that the field may not be sanctioned for rugby, and I heard you just mention that there's rugby lines there. Do you know, is there any issues with the rugby playing on that field at all?
I've heard that as well, and I'm not sure what it has to do with it. Perhaps, Jeff, can I ask you to see if you've got any input on that?
Yeah, so our rugby program is practicing on the field right now.
Oh, okay.
We have had some feedback from some of the other schools that they wouldn't be necessarily wanting to play on it because they're worried about carpet burns and what have you. But I think part of that is they don't understand the quality of the field that we have here. So I think as teams get on it, they'll see what it's like.
But there's no issues.
Maybe it's a longer Under Armour you wear. But yeah, we're having some early discussions on that, but our kids are on it.
Great.
And they like it.
Thank you.
The absence of rabbits will be good.
And Jeff, did you heard if it's just simply a preference for natural surface versus like natural grass versus?
Yeah, it would be preference for natural surface.
So that's maybe where it's going to come. There's field goal bases, and they're movable. So from NFL to CFL, and then they all come out, and then there's a cover goes back on, and the little granulars go back down. There's a score clock. It's about 9 by 20 feet. It's a substantial. It's essentially a TV, but not quite as high tech and full motion as a TV. I'll talk about 30-second clock off to the side as well. I'll talk about that in a little bit. So then you can just simply see a view from one end of the field and a view from the other, and of course fully lit. And if you've driven by at night when it's a dark, misty, and you see those lights and the path of the lights, it changes the landscape, the skyline of it's quite something. We are having an expert come back out, and they're going to take a light meter and they're going to walk around. They're going to make sure that all of the light, every meter or whatever grid is appropriate. So the remaining items, we have essentially the field contract is complete. So the carpet, all the deficiencies were done quite quickly. The only outstanding items are the civil items, and I won't go into detail about those, but they include things like minor sidewalk work, connecting up catch basins, a little bit of paving, different things like that, the concrete that they're supposed to be done by this Friday. So that's what the list from the architect and the contractor indicate. Now, whether they are or not, I don't know. That's what they indicate. The major item that's of concern that's been delayed is the scorekeeper table. And the scorekeeper table includes the brains of the whole score clock operation and all the connections that are required to operate the score clock. So we looked at ways of temporarily having that score clock being operated, and there really wasn't anything that we could do inexpensively. So it's a custom-built table that's weatherproof and heated, and it actually stays in the same location year-round. So it's got a cover plus its own kiosk, vandal-proof kiosk, and we felt that was important. We changed it during the construction. We felt it was important for the ease of the users. Now they can get a key, they can show up, all the equipment's there. They don't have to wheel it from some other location to set it up. So we believe that ultimately it'll be easier for people to use and encourage the use of it, which is what we want. The RFP for the bleachers is being prepared for advertising now, and thanks to purchasing and Jetta for helping us put that together. And that's the last major component of the project. And then we move a little bit into ongoing operations. As I said, we're transitioned from construction, and boy, what a feeling it is to complete a capital project and transition to some other agency to look after, versus having to move into the maintenance mode of your own building. And so the operations committee has had 2 meetings. Jeff and myself are official representatives. So we have identified and we're working on key items. So I won't go into detail, but we're working to address the most urgent items and then working through all the other items associated. There's a parking committee. We've had 2 meetings, and again, we've identified long-term, short-term, immediate items, and we're working through those to make sure we maximize the use of the parking. there's ongoing discussions with the city regarding the operation with respect to the license for the track and field clubhouse. So as you recall, we licensed the track and field clubhouse to the city. They have a user group in the track and field club. And so we're just working through the small items. Does the city want us to remove graffiti? Do they want minor maintenance things? So we're just basically supporting our partner at this point. And then the last item is we're still supporting city staff with respect to the transition of ownership of those two portions. So there's minor items they're looking for our support on, so we're happy to give that. Now, with respect to school use, I had an opportunity to talk to Jeff about how that's coming along, but since he's here tonight, I'll ask him if he wants to talk a bit about that.
Sure. Thanks, Pete. Yeah, it's amazing when I think about the field, where we were last year, what NDSS looked like in the back was typically, what it looked like for years and years. And it was within a year of that our lacrosse coach was here and he was talking about the condition of the field. And now we have a remarkable structure, so we're pretty excited about it. It's only been in our hands in the winter months, so in the time of year where you don't have a lot of usage outside, so it's going to pick up in the spring. But that all being said, if it's rainy and what have you, the condition of the field is still perfect. So we've had our phys ed classes on there, as we have access to it all day. Our lacrosse program has been the one that's typically been using it the most. And with that, we weren't able to host lacrosse games at all until we had this facility. So we've hosted a number of games already. And tomorrow, if you're around, we have 2 games scheduled. So we have Vancouver College coming over, which is a high school, and we'll have their junior players play, I believe, at 11:30, and then the seniors will play at 1. The senior game should be really a good contest. Our juniors are a lot stronger than their juniors, so we're playing some of our younger kids against their junior program. So you'll see that. As we move into the spring here, our football program will start in April, so you'll see the football kids out there. Over the course of the fall and in the summer, you might have seen our kids coming across from the 3rd Street Connector fields. And we were lucky with the city partnership that we were able to use that in the transition. So football will be going, and we'll have Spring Jamboree in June, and we get to host that on the field, so we'll have multiple schools coming for that. We also have our soccer season starting and what have you. So it's great, and when it's lit at night, it's amazing. The first PAC meeting of the year, the first January PAC meeting, you could look out of our library and see the lights and the kids running around. It's just like daylight on that field when you're on there, and very little bleed out of the light on the outside. So when you're off the field, it's dark, and when you're on it, it's just like daytime, so it's amazing. So and then rugby, you just referenced rugby. With any field that you have to work around some of those kind of issues, but I think for us, we expect to be hosting rugby games, and the odd game we might have to put on a natural surface, but we're moving forward with that. So yeah, it's exciting, and we're very pleased to have it.
Thanks, Jeff, I appreciate that.
And I also love the drone shots, and I ask Dale for extra drone shots as much as I can, because it gives us a different perspective.
Okay, well, we would have been on time, but Jeff kind of went over. Got a bit carried away.
Sorry, Mr. Stable.
Jeff and I were just talking
I
about
lose track of that.
teasing each other and bullying. So, well, and that brings me to the end, so if there's any questions or comments.
Trustee Ray?
I just want to say this is something that everybody in this room should be extremely proud of. We worked hard with the City of Nanaimo, the City Council, their staff, our staff, to work together, to collaborate, to do what the public expects us to do, and work together and find and put something in our community that serves everyone. And my hat's off to you, Pete, and your crew, to the City of Nanaimo and their crew. This is something we should be really proud of, and I know I am, so well done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll leave it to Steve for the superlatives.
So we're going to move on to item number 11.1, and I'm not sure who's going to present on this, but we're going to be discussing the Hammond Bay Phase 1 capital project.
Okay, so Mr. Sabo and I will team this, if you don't mind. So We're about to present something that is exciting for us as well. As you're aware, for the last 25 years, Hammond Bay has been requested a capital project to increase the gym. Just to give you a little bit of information before we go on to the next piece, is that we were down to the ministry and presented a two-phase project, one for the gymnasium addition and two for some additional classrooms and etc. In those conversations, we were suggesting that we were going to be able to finance the gymnasium, and we were looking for ministry money to do the classrooms, and also enter into that the phase 2 part of it, possibly with a partnership with the city around some parking and some neck point access. So at this point in time, the ministry said that they're not quite ready to move on with their phase of it. But since it's a #1 capital project for the board as we move on our capital projects, and we've identified approximately $1.5 million in our surplus capital to move forward with the project, and staff is now coming to the board to recommend for you to direct us to move forward with the new gymnasium expansion project for Hammond Bay as quickly as possible. And that would lead us into the possible ability to begin the project in the ground over the summertime, and which would align to completing it during the fall probably, which would limit the amount of problems at the school level in their gym. So we'd be utilizing the summertime when the students aren't there. So Mr. Sable is going to show you the project as we've talked about it, and then I believe we've crafted a motion for the board if they wish to move us forward into the next phase.
So before Pete presents, I'll just ask.
Well, I was going to make a motion.
Okay. Yeah, let's have the presentation first, and then we'll. Tanya, do you have a question?
I was going to make a motion
okay.
too.
All right.
Oh,
you guys are excited.
Well, it won't take very long. It was Jeff. So here's a shot of Hammond Bay Gym. You can see it's 2/3 the normal size, and so the addition would go on the right-hand side. That's left-hand side. That's just off the page. We did a master planning process, and in gray you see where we would put an addition. And so in the master planning process, we looked at the total build out and worked backwards to see where we would do an addition and what size that addition would be. And you can see that the gym, the gray area for the gym does not touch the gray area for the rest of the addition. So that gives us the ability to build one or the other without affecting the project. So that's the discrete phase. You can see here that the addition of the gym, we have a set of plans developed to a certain extent that are ready to go. We've had a gym PDR completed, which is the last step before the design development. And so that's it. As you're aware, the gym addition has been included in the 5-year capital plan almost every year since phase 1 went ahead in 1997 or something. The current ask includes the gymnasium expansion. We completed the master plan process. We confirmed the locations, as I've said, that they're discrete. And we did a costing update to make sure that we understood full costs for the project, including soft costs, as well as below the line risks. And they're included in the 1.5 number quoted by Superintendent Blaine. So that includes all the costs. As indicated, support by the ministry for a complete project is uncertain. The gym's a discrete phase, so consideration given by staff to decouple it to phase 1. Now this would affect our contribution for the project, for the addition project, which is mandated by the ministry now that districts contribute to capital projects. However, we have had a talk with our regional planning officer who indicated if you can take that contribution now, build the gym addition, that would not affect us getting phase 2. In other words, it's almost like our contribution went into the gym, and they would recognize that in the future.
So what was our total ask for the full project?
10.7. That included the gym and all the other associated information.
Thank you.
And so as indicated by the superintendent, staff are suggesting consideration be given to proceed immediately as a phase 1 gym addition only, and so that's simply the addition on the gym, no connection to the building, etc. But that's the main concern of the school, is to expand that gym. And then we would continue to ask for the school capacity expansion in the upcoming capital plan as one of our higher priorities.
Thank you. So I do believe Secretary Treasurer crafted a motion. That's already been circulated?
Yes.
Oh, good. Very good.
Trustee Brennan?
Thank you, Chair, and I'm pleased to move that the Business Committee recommends the Board of Education direct staff to move forward with plans to complete the new gym at Hammond Bay Elementary as phase 1 for the facilities plan.
I'll second it. Second it.
And this brings great joy because this is not the first time I've made a motion like this in this room. Mr. Sable probably remembers the great defeats of the past. And these people have been waiting for a long time. That's a small gym. Kids are embarrassed when other teams come to play in that gym because it's so small that the volleyballs always hit the ceiling. And basketball, they take 2 steps and they're at the wall. So, not quite, but almost. And also the structure's been deteriorating, structurally over the years. So this will be well received. People like Nicole Letterberg, whose kids are probably in their 40s now, was one of the great advocates of this new gym. So I'm sure she'll be pleased, but she'll also be somewhat unhappy that it took so long. But here it is, and let's celebrate it.
Here, here.
Trustee Ray?
Thank you. I'm obviously in support of this motion. I think it's important to know that this is phase 1. The superintendent, the secretary, treasurer, and myself went and met with the Ministry of Education and presented our bigger plan, where we asked for a 2-phase project. We asked, as Mr. Sabo said, $10 million. And we're going to continue to work with them on phase 2. We're going to push them to do this sooner than later. They've been receptive to our plan. They liked our business case. But we are going to move ahead with this with our money. And we're going to do this on our own. This will act as our down payment for phase 2. And we have open dialogue with the ministry, and we are continuing to look forward to pushing them to write us a check for the remainder of this. But this is something we should be very proud of in this room. As Trustee Brennan said, this has been a long time, and let's get this thing started. Let's go.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried unanimously.
Yes.
All right. Do we have any questions? No. Looking for an adjournment? From the third heart-shaped chair.
Thank you for spending Valentine's Day with us, everyone. So